The St. Louis Blues are the hottest team in the NHL. Their winning streak has catapulted them into playoff contention. Haley Taylor Simon of Locked On Blues is here to talk about that and potential playoff prospects next on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here, and welcome everybody to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Blues, Haley Taylor Simon. And Haley, great time to be a Blues fan. They have found their stride on this great winning streak. What has been the biggest difference for this Blues team during the streak?
So I'm happy to be here with the 15-2-2 Blues post-break. And I think the one thing that the Blues have really strived off of since coming back from the break is a sense of it's all or nothing. Doug Armstrong made it very clear that he was going to stand pat post the trade deadline, which meant that he believed that this team, despite the fact that people say, oh, they don't have enough talent, that they could still be a playoff contending team. And what we're seeing is what I saw this entire time with the Blues. We're seeing Jordan Binnington and Joel Hofer outstanding in net. We're seeing the excellence from Dylan Holloway. We're seeing the amazing leadership from Robert Thomas, Braden Shen. And most importantly, what we're seeing is a team of underdogs. Everybody counted out the Blues. They all said they don't have enough talent, they're not good enough, and this team is playing with heart. And something that a lot of teams in the NHL are not doing in this time of year, where they're playing, I guess you can say, more sporadically, whereas the Blues are playing with passion.
Do you think that vote of confidence from management had an impact on this streak?
I would like to think yes. I think at the end of the day, when you've already missed 2 consecutive seasons without making a playoff appearance, that does take a toll on you. And a lot of people tend to forget that last season, the Blues also stood pat and they didn't do anything. And they ended up finishing to be the best worst team in the NHL. So they were right there on the cusp of going into the playoffs. But this year, they decided to at least make the fight start a little bit earlier than they did last season, just due to the fact that this was the same St. Louis Blues team that couldn't even put together a winning streak until a couple months ago. So I feel like there's just been a lot of motivation from the guys. Hey, we don't want to end this season without going to the playoffs.
How important was participating in Four Nations and playing well in Four Nations for Jordan Binnington and his confidence?
It was huge. Binnington, and I said this the entire season on Locked On Blues, he had a defense in front of him besides like Colton Parayko that wasn't really to the caliber that you would expect to have in front of you as one of the best goalies in the league. And I think that playing for Team Canada and getting that win for Jordan Binnington, playing all of the games, was huge for his confidence level. I mean, this was the same kid. I say kid, but this was the same guy that played his rookie season and got his team the cup. So some of the best hockey that you see from Jordan Binnington is in those intense moments. And in the Four Nations face-off, I know a lot of people were critical of how Binnington played in the first couple of games, but during that final game against Team USA, it was some of the best hockey we saw from Binnington. And it just so happened that it was in the lovely TD Garden where the Blues got their first Stanley Cup.
Yeah, little poetic justice there.
It was.
Talk to me about Dylan Holloway. I mean, he may not get a lot of attention nationally, but he really does seem to be having a huge impact on the Blues right now.
Hollywood Holloway. I mean, there is so much to say about him. Nobody expected him coming into the season, and I'm talking more so the Edmonton fans, to break out as much as he's had. Everybody said at most maybe he would have 18 points, 20 points, and he's exceeded that already. Holloway also has managed to get a point per game and just continues on this incredible point streak. but he is a top 6 forward. And I feel like on Edmonton, he was never going to get that chance to be a top 6 forward just due to all the veteran talents that they had. And I understand why. However, when you take a young player like Dylan Holloway, who is still developing, and you're putting him on that second line, you're allowing him the opportunity to really exceed. And I am seeing somebody that's going to be a star in the NHL. I really thought it was going to be Robert Thomas. I did. That was going to be the biggest star of the Blues. I think it's going to be Dylan Holloway.
And as far as using those offer sheets, that seems to have paid off quite well, what they did over the offseason.
Thank you, Edmonton, for not matching it, for not even trying. I understand, that the Blues were paying a bit much for Philip Broberg, and I will still stand by that. It was a little bit too much. However, it's really worked out. I mean, Broberg is such a great two-way defenseman. I feel like, and I said this on Locked On Blues, actually, I've been trolling the Edmonton fans because they're so delusional sometimes, with all due respect, in that they said, oh, well, Dylan Holloway, he's not that great. He wouldn't play the same way that he does here in St. Louis on Edmonton. And I have to disagree with that. I think that with the Edmonton Oilers, you have a team that is relatively older. They're the oldest team in the NHL. They have a lot of talented players. I'm not going to disrespect that. However, these were two players that you got in the first round of the draft throughout 2019 and 2020. And you were kind of like planning on them being the future of your team. And another team comes in with a very attractive offer sheet, and you don't match it for at least one of them. I feel like that was a huge mistake on the organization of the Oilers, but a win for the Blues. And it just goes to show Doug Armstrong only has a couple more seasons left being GM before Alexander Steen takes over. And he is showing why he is the longest tenured GM in Blues history due to putting out an offer sheet, not just one, but two offer sheets. And both of those guys have panned out quite well.
The penalty kill has been an issue for most of the season. They're ranked near the bottom of the league. Can they improve it, and why is it struggling so much?
That's a great question. And I'm just going to say no. I think it is what it is at this point. The Blues, they've struggled with special teams, not even just this season, but last season. And it's just one of those things where you have to really hope that the guys play smart and don't draw any penalties. However, I still feel like the defense, and as much as I'm happy about the winning, the defense will always be an issue with this team, especially with Colton Parayko out. Now, he has been at skates, which is a really good sign because, again, they said about 6 weeks. So the fact that he's taking the ice already within like 3 weeks is a good sign. However, that's where the Blues do struggle in. So again, they just cannot draw any penalties.
What is your biggest concern? Right now, the Blues have a bit of a cushion, about 6 points, but Vancouver has a couple of games in hand. What is your biggest concern the rest of the way for this team?
My concern is the consistency. I think having a 9-game win streak is phenomenal, something that I did not expect out of the Blues. However, in the same time, the Blues, they do have a bit of a cushion. But again, we talk about the Flames and the Canucks, and they do have a couple games in hand. So for me, that is my concern. It's not necessarily the fact I know the Blues are going to end up losing a game. Well, and I'm not trying to, say that. However, it's going to be impossible to really win out when you're going to be playing teams like the Oilers and some other good competitive hockey teams. However, it's the fact is if the Flames get hot, if the Canucks get hot, who knows what can happen? Before the season, Seth, who does Locked On Wild, and I, we both said that the 2 wild card spots would be taken by Central Division teams. And right now, that's the case. But for the Blues, it's to get into that wild card one. They need a little bit more of a cushion before the season comes to an end. That is my goal.
And right now, it would seem like nobody would want to play the Blues in the playoffs the way they've been playing lately. Do you think this team can stay hot enough to go on a playoff run?
I sure hope so. That would be the goal. My concern is that while the Blues, and I have to remind everybody that there is still Stanley Cup champions on the St. Louis Blues. And this was a team, people say it's a lot like 2019, where they were the worst team in the NHL at January, right? And then they became Cup champions. But that team had some more veteran presence. And I'm not disregarding Cam Fowler, but I believe it's been like 7 years since Fowler was in the playoffs. And again, Ryan Suter, I mean, he's been all around the Central Division. But I think when it comes to the team in 2019, you had guys like Pat Maroon, obviously, who played a really big role, and O'Reilly. So I think that is a little bit different. However, I think with the momentum that these guys have, that's when you expect a guy like a Robert Thomas to step up, or Jordan Binnington, because they have been there, Braden Shen even.
All right. Well, it's going to be an exciting finish to the season. I know you'll have it covered every step of the way. Haley, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Yep. So if you want to watch Locked On Blues here on YouTube, you can just go to Locked On Blues. If you want to go to Twitter, I've been live tweeting now. That's been a new thing. And I feel like a lot of people have been enjoying my rants during the game. So check that out on Locked On Blues on Twitter. Or if you want my own personal Twitter account, just go to Haley T. Simon.
All right. Haley, thank you so much.
Thank you.